Talk to us about RSD.
Okay.
And the reason I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The reason I want to bring this up, Miranda, the inspiration for tonight's episode, which I'm sorry, it's been such a off the rails episode. Miranda should have done you better than this. She also wanted to know about RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria.
Rejection sensitive dysphoria.
Sensitive dysphoria. She asked about that, so I wanted to take a few minutes to ask you about what that is. I see it going around online a little bit.
Yeah.
Talk to me about info dump. Tell me what you know about RSD.
Oh no, I haven't reached my optimum autism level of information to info dump on this. But I do like talking about it, and it is something that's being talked about more and more. I think it's really important to know about. So what people should know, my caveat to this is that from what I gather, we don't really know that we're very, very new to studying this part. It's not something that's like diagnosable at this point.
Is this specific to ADHD or anything? Or?
But it tends to be specific to ADHD.
Okay.
I have seen some people say that it's specific to people who have both ADHD and autism. And even some people who are saying that it can just be with autism. But most commonly, it's associated with ADHD. So let's talk about.
And generally, we could say it's associated with neurodiversity.
We can definitely say that it's that it's linked with neurodivergence. So, what we think is true is that there's probably some physiological difference. So some like actual brain difference with this, that there's a real thing happening here. It's not just something that like develops over time from experience. That there's probably some predisposition to it. But basically, rejection sensitivity is when the biggest thing that people talk about and experience with it is having an actual physical reaction of pain to being rejected or being perceived as being rejected.
Yeah.
That we say a lot, that like rejection hurts. But these folks will say, that's not a metaphor for me. It physically hurts. I feel it in my body. It's like a knife stabbing me. They'll describe a particular sensation a lot of the time that goes along with it. And it makes rejection something, of course, really to be avoided. And rejection can be especially common with neurodivergent folks because we don't always fit in, or we'll misread a social situation, or we do the thing and then somebody rejects us. And so it can be common, and that can like build up this cycle.
Ladies, I married your therapist at gmail.com. Give me the address of who rejected you, okay? I'm going to toot my own horn a little bit here, ladies. I work out, okay? I will come and clobber them, okay? Clobber them. Tell me who rejected you. You're beautiful and you deserve better. That's all I want to say. Please, go on, Ashlyn.
No, I think that wraps it up.
So we're really talking about, like, I feel a specific articulable physical sensation when I perceive that I am rejected.
Yeah. So that's one of the key factors, is that people will say that they like feel rejection, and other people will be like, yeah, rejection does hurt. And they're like, that's not what I mean. I mean, it physically hurts. That makes sense because when we have a really strong reaction to something, when something really triggers that like survival part of us, one of the body's ways of managing that is pain, because pain gets us to pay attention to things.
Right.
So I think that all makes sense in a loop as part of it. But there are things that make it more likely to be rejected that come along with having ADHD, like we were just talking about, where friendships can be hard to maintain, relationships can be hard to maintain. And so there's going to be a lot more opportunity for this to happen. And the hard thing is as life experience teaches you that, like, yeah, rejection is something that's going to keep happening, you're going to be more and more fearful of it, more likely to get into relationships that aren't healthy for you, that come with like those big promises and everything, like we've talked about in kind of the abusive relationships episode, and like more likely to be in situations that aren't healthy for you. But yeah, rejection sensitive dysphoria is a real thing that happens, and a lot of people end up feeling like they, maybe they start to isolate to protect themselves from that, or they might have a rejection where they're feeling the consequences of that for years after, and the pain of that for a really long time. So it can just make relationships feel really tough. Sorry, my cough got up to me.
No, you're okay. You're doing great. You
Thanks.
sound great. I think that I can relate to that, and I think it's because so frequently, or part of the reason I can relate to that is so frequently rejection happens, but we're not entirely sure why.
Yeah.
We put so much of ourselves into our work or into our relationships, and our brain works a little different than other people. I'm speaking like broad brushstrokes for neurodiverse people here, neurodivergent people. Our brain works a little bit differently. So we're specifically like trying to make sure that we fit in, because we're like consciously aware. We're told at every turn that we don't.
Yep.
That we don't. We're constantly having to mask, and it's fucking
you're
exhausting.
Constantly getting that message, and then that like confirmation bias is going to fit in. You believe you're going to be rejected, so you're looking for it. And so like another part of RSD is that you can misread rejection even when it's not happening.
Yeah.
And still have that pain of rejection. You can have a really hard time starting projects or starting tasks if you think that there might be a chance for failure, because failure can feel like rejection.
Yeah. And it's so hard to swallow like a rejection, because we're getting down to the core of like being a human, which is that we are desperately looking for community. We're looking for connection with other people.
It's a need. It's a biological
need. And when we feel like that's so fraught or so frail to begin with, that the fear of rejection becomes like a survival thing. So if you feel a physical pain when you're being rejected, remember that that's your body reminding you you're a human who deserves to be loved and deserves to be connected with other people. And I'm with you. I'm with you, and we're trying, with this podcast, we're trying to encourage, specifically attract and encourage people who are neurodivergent. But we're hoping that if you're a fucking normie, that you come in and you're able to better understand what it's like to be neurodivergent, because I think that just that knowledge and that understanding, we can create more equitable workspaces, we can create more equitable relationships where people, and I think that we're all stronger for being able to allow people to operate the way that their brains truly are.
Yeah, I think it's so much easier to live together when we get each other, when we understand what's happening, that even though it's not our personal experience, that like this is a real thing that's happening for people.
Yeah.
And when people are, maybe making too big a deal about a breakup or a friendship loss or a perceived rejection or the fear of failure, like they might be having this very real thing happening for them. And not only might they be having this, but also they've probably faced more of that in their life in general. And that's very hard to deal with. Something else that's a part of this and why it's specific to ADHD and neurodivergence is the difficulty with emotional regulation. And so when you do face rejection, you can have a really hard time pulling your emotions back together. That you might have big explosion at feeling a rejection, and that can really increase rejection, because that's something that people really push themselves away from, and it can just make this really tough. But also, like, you're not broken. There's a real difference that you're dealing with, and this is something I deal with a lot with counseling clients, and it's something that we like work through, and they start to gain more confidence.
And I think the best thing you can do if you feel like you fall into this category of having this RSD is to kind of comfort yourself and help yourself, like equip yourself with the knowledge of why you feel these ways.
And the validation that you're going through a real thing. You're not just worse at handling rejection than other people, that like it impacts you differently than it impacts other people.
Yeah.
You're dealing with a real thing.